Ankita,
And this is Nalini.
and you are tuned in to Prickly Pears, the podcast where we celebrate uninhibited brown women and their prickly points of view. This is season 2, and it's the season where we talk all about purpose. But before I share more, Nalini, take it away.
Today we have a very special guest. I mean, all our guests are special, but Naomi with us today is, I'm not going to spoil her intro. Naomi, introduce yourself to us and then we go from there.
Thank you, Nalini and Ankita. Thank you for having me. To introduce myself, I am Naomi Sheedy. I'm a mental health advocate and coach. I help people beat anxiety, burnout, and your daily struggles using yoga and Ayurveda. I am a banker turned yogi, as I'd like to put it. I found my purpose through my struggles. I have now dedicated my life to help people redefine their well-being and redefine what wellness means to them, what their mental health means to them, and get people to be more in touch with themselves. I'm glad to be here to chat more about it.
This couldn't be a more perfect season to have you, because I think you on your social media and everywhere that you speak at other events, like you talk quite a bit around this topic on purpose. So I think it would be foolish to ask like our standard question, have you found your purpose? Because you sort of gave it away. But do tell us, what is your purpose and how did you go about finding it?
So the purpose, the word in itself, just means having meaning, like having a reason to do what you're doing. To me, that was massively missing in my life. So when I was looking for my purpose, I was just looking for meaning. I felt like I was so disconnected with every day of my life. I felt disconnected from how I was living it, what I was doing, what I was eating. I just felt directionless. So once I got that idea clear and I started working towards that, I think that's when I found my purpose. I feel like a lot of people will think of purpose as something that they have to do to serve others, or like they look outwards for a sense of purpose. But I have done this myself and I would encourage people to look inwards. And that's what I have done. So in that sense, yes, I found my purpose, and this is my purpose, is to show up every day, find meaning and a direction in every single thing I do.
And that doesn't have to be one thing, or is it one thing that you're going towards, or that one North Star?
Absolutely not. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be something that you do as a job. It doesn't have to be something that you do to fill up your working day. It does not. Like, your purpose has to be something that you're aligned with. I'll give you an example. For like, some people work to provide for their families. Now, their work is not their purpose. Their purpose in this scenario is to provide for their family. Knowing that helps them go to work every day, put their best self forward, and find balance in the work that they're doing and the outcome that they have. That is the example of finding a purpose. So it does not have to be something that you do outside of your house. It can be something that you are as well.
We are going to take a pause here because I would love to come back to this topic, but I want to ask you, did you always feel that way? Like, tell us how it was while growing up. Were you going in one single direction like most of us do when we're children? I want to be this when I grow up, or I want to do that when I grow up. And then like how that has changed from then to now is something I would love for you to share.
To give you a little bit of background, I think when I was growing up, as a child, I was very, I would say, confident. It's hard to describe that confidence because I feel disconnected to that sense of confidence that I felt as a child. As a child, I enjoyed school. I enjoyed any activity that I was doing. I was fully focused on every single thing that I was partaking in, whether that is school curriculum or family stuff, anything and everything that I was doing. I was very present in it. So I felt this and I knew what I was doing. Also as a child, like there are few things that you know or need to know. So I'd say my confidence always comes with knowing. Growing up, like through college, I would say, I felt this confidence shatter because suddenly I'm open to a whole new world. School is very sheltered, your family life is always so sheltered, and college really like opens you up. And I think that is true to everyone, right? Because you get exposed to other people and like ways of life, and you're starting to like expand your own horizons and the way you like look at life. And I think that really shattered my confidence because I was not so sure of myself anymore. So when I was a child, I thought I always wanted to be an actress. I just loved performing. And I did my first play as a 7-year-old, and I was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I was the stepmother. I was the evil queen in that. And I like owned that role. I still remember that feeling. Like it just as a child, I always wanted to be an actress. But then during college and this growing up period, I didn't know what I wanted to be. To be honest, I don't think I was looking for that answer either. I was just going with the flow. I knew things I didn't want to do. So I was content with that. Like I didn't want to do science, for example. I didn't want to like do anything that was medicine related or engineering. Like these are like the categories that growing up in India you're like using to like to find your direction. So I knew the things that I didn't want to do, and so I ended up in investment banking, not out of choice, because I didn't really see anything else, and this worked for me. I got into a really good investment bank, and my very first attempt, I did an internship with them, got hired back, and it was like I couldn't really complain about anything.
And this was all in India?
This was all in India, in Bangalore, yeah. So when I started working then, I was like, okay, this is great because this pays me well. I got this traveling bug when I started, and up until then, I kind of like always knew I liked to travel, but never really put meaning to it, never really put too much thought into it. It was like a wishful thinking out in the distance, like in my subconscious, really. So when I started working and I was able to fund my travels, I enjoyed doing that. So very soon I moved to London. I think I was 22 when I moved to London. So I'm still very young, and I love the idea of traveling. It like really, lit me up from inside. So I started just going with the flow of work because it helped me travel. It was providing this lifestyle that I really enjoyed. I never really sat down to ask myself why I enjoy traveling, or what is it about traveling that, draws me towards it, or what is it about the life that I'm leading. Even I was okay to do a job that I didn't really feel connected to. I never really sat myself down and asked those questions. I don't think people in their early 20s really do that either. And, it's no one's fault. You have to be very in tune with yourself and to do that. So I
don't know about Gen Z. Like maybe at least both Ankita and I are millennials, and we feel like maybe like today's generation is going somewhere else. But yeah.
Yeah, like I'm a millennial as well. So I did not see anyone else in my age doing that. And if anything, doing that seemed uncool. And I don't know how it is now. but I think I was doing it to a large extent, especially when I was living in London, because I felt very disconnected. That feeling of disconnect like was really pulling me down. I would spend weekends just in bed. I would wake up on a Saturday at 4 p.m. in the afternoon because I just didn't have the energy to get up and do anything, because I was like, the weekend is the time where I can do something for myself. So unless I was traveling and I didn't have anything else planned, I just felt like I was in this void. Like there was no meaning or purpose to anything that I was doing. I'm going to this job. I'm showing up every day to this job because it provides for this like travel lifestyle. And when I've booked holidays, I'm like, I have something to look forward to and I'm going. When I don't have any holidays booked, like on the weekends that I'm just in London, I was like, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do. And that, obviously at that time I didn't realize was how badly it was affecting me. But looking back now, I know it was that disconnect really brought me down. Like I was depressed, and not knowing that this is something that I can fix myself or that I brought upon myself. I just dealt with it as no energy. Like it's hard to keep up with my life. Like, I just need to catch a break. That's just what I told myself. And that feeling of disconnect carried on for a long period of time. So I'd say this whole purpose, or the journey to like finding my purpose, and I keep saying purpose in quotes because to me it still feels like a really heavy word. Like what I'm doing now is just work that I'm doing that has meaning behind it. And I think that is what I lacked in my life before. So that obviously affected things like my confidence, my identity, my energy, my my vibe, like myself that I brought to people. It affected all of these things. And that's why I also said, like, I was really confident as a child because I was very in tune with who I was. Like, I loved it. I loved acting. I loved like academics. I loved all of these things. And I knew that. But apart from traveling, I didn't know what else I loved at all. And this is all pre-pandemic. And I think all of us have a pre-pandemic, post-pandemic life. So this is all pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic period really pushed me in all directions. I have like this whole journey during the pandemic, and I don't think we have enough time in this podcast to go through that. But long story short, I was pushed around a lot by external decisions like the pandemic, visa rules, Trump's administration. Like, there's so many different things that affected my life, and I felt so helpless. I was literally just being driven around. Supposed to work in New York. I started working in New York, and I landed in Hong Kong. Like, I literally ended up in Hong Kong and never thought I was going to move to Asia at that time in my life. And I was then suddenly starting a life in Hong Kong. So that really affected me because I felt so out of control. It was...
Why did you end up in Hong Kong, for our listeners who might be wondering?
I ended up in Hong Kong because during the pandemic year, I joined this team in New York, and I'd already started working for them, and I was going through my visa process. And then when the pandemic happened and all the borders shut, we were just waiting for like when the embassies will open, I can go apply for my visa. But then in July, Trump announced no more new work visas for anyone trying to enter. And I got affected in that because I was in the process of applying for a visa. And I couldn't stay in London any longer because my visa had expired. So the team that I was working in New York, because I'd already started working for them, they luckily had another team in Hong Kong, and they asked me if I would like to move to Hong Kong. And I didn't have a choice at the time. I really liked the team that I had like started working for. It was like a good trajectory for my career. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to Hong Kong. I don't have another choice at this point, really. So that's how from New York I ended up going to Hong Kong. It's insane. Like, all my things were in storage. I didn't have like a house to live in. I like stayed in Airbnbs for a bit, stayed with family. And I remember just feeling so out of control. I was living my life literally one day at a time. I had no idea what's going to happen like 2 days from now. Even it's not as simple as, oh, we're just going to Hong Kong now. It was every day checking to see if flights are going or not, if they're accepting visitors or not. Every single day, the quarantine rules were changing, your like vaccination rules were changing. There was so much going on. And I just felt like I was being herded around. I felt so lonely. I felt so disconnected. So when I got to Hong Kong, and don't get me wrong, I loved my life in Hong Kong. Like, I was so pleased to have actually lived there, but I've still not made peace with the fact that it was so out of choice. I just felt so out of control. And I think that's when I started really asking myself, why am I so out of control? Why do I not get a say in anything? And I'm not even talking about like the bigger things like your move. I just felt like, who am I waking up for? Like, what am I going to work for? These are the questions that I just desperately needed answers for. And I started looking for these answers because I wanted to make sense out of everything. I wanted to like come to terms with the fact that, oh, today I'm now suddenly waking up in Hong Kong. I had to start somewhere, and I started questioning, why is this happening? What is the purpose of this? What can this lead to? I was like making my pros and cons list, all because I wanted to come to terms with the fact that I'm now living in Hong Kong. And I think my journey to like finding my purpose started somewhere around that time. It's like, I wanted to know that everything that happened up until then is leading to something. I think that was like my way of consoling myself.
And from then, we want to know how the journey progressed. But if we cut to today, you live in Ireland, you've left your banking job like way behind you. And if I go as per your social media, like this is the happiest time of your life in terms of like having resets and having things in life that you really, truly, as you said in the beginning, that drive meaning on a day-to-day basis. Can you describe quickly, maybe like in a minute, your days these days, now that you have found your purpose?
This is a very loaded question because this is how I started to redesign my life. Not having my day look a certain way was like really bothersome. So I started with what did I want one day of my life to look like? And not just like one random day. I wanted that to be consistent. So can I wake up and eat without distractions? can I wake up and not rush to work? I hated the concept of rushing, and I did it all the time. I did it for so many years. I used to work backwards. If I have to leave the house at like 10 past 8, then 8 minutes past 8, I'm like putting my shoes on. 5 minutes past 8, I'm like tying my hair. It was always like working backwards. So I was like, I want to look at how I'm designing my day. Today, I am waking up, spending time with myself, even if it's 5 minutes on some days, if it's an hour on some days, it doesn't matter. I'm like taking that time with myself. I eat without distractions. I eat food that I know has value to me. Like, I'm not mindlessly eating. I am spending equal amounts of time working and nurturing a creative part of me that I didn't get a chance to do before. That doesn't mean equal parts in the sense that I'm doing 4 hours of work and 4 hours of creative life. That's not what I mean. Some days I'm working more. Some days I'm like being more creative, or I'm like resting more. But I know now whatever I'm doing, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. So that is what my day is like.
Do you think that's a privilege to be able to do that? Or do you think that you designed your life in a knowing way to reach that privilege? Because there's so many listeners out there that would not have this choice. Like, not everybody has this choice.
I wouldn't, this may be controversial, I wouldn't say it's a privilege. I think making the decisions that I did, which is like leaving my job, starting up my own business, I think that came from a place of privilege. But my day being meaningful, my day being purposeful is not a privilege. I think that's a basic given right that everyone should exercise. And I feel people don't see that as doable, which is why they see people who are able to do that as privilege. But I think there are variations to every single task that I said and that I sort of like live by. I think there are variations of that is unique to each person. And it is doable, whether you have children or like a really busy schedule or you have responsibilities. Like, everyone's life is so unique. There isn't a single template to like follow for every single person. If you want to make a difference, if you want your day to look different, you can and you will make that happen. It's like, where there's a will, there's a way. A lot of times people don't want to take on, they're just so resistant to change. I read this somewhere where, you're just so comfortable in discomfort. You kind of don't want to push yourself out of it because you're resistant to change. So you just put up with what has now become a norm. But then it's not a matter of privilege at all. It's like you're choosing every single thing that you do.
And the people that you coach, how do you help them? You and I had this conversation when I was in a job like in which I couldn't ever imagine a burnout. You might, I don't know if you want to say it, but what I said to you back in the day.
You said to me, I remember very clearly, I like all the stuff that you're talking about burnout, but I don't think that applies to me at the moment. But I'm really interested in Ayurveda. So talk to me more about Ayurveda.
From that to just 6 months from that day that we spoke, I had my first panic attack. And for exactly probably the same reasons that you just mentioned. I was in a new job. I didn't have control over anything that was happening to me. Like, I was pushed in a situation where morning to evening, I'm just like in meetings. I just don't know like half of the things, like what they're about. So basically the lack of control. And today, like 3 months into the same job, when I took a reset, like I took a few days off despite like the job being so demanding. There was no other way. Like, I was physically incapacitated to do anything else. So I had to take a step back. And then now I'm like probably working more than what I was doing initially, but I rarely get that feeling working on it a lot. But there are so many people like the September 2023 me who would say the burnout and anxiety and all that is not for me. And like, because either we are so comfortable with discomfort, as you said, or we just don't think it's for us then at that day and time, but things can change very quickly. How do you help people, or like the kind of people that come to you? Do they come with a specific problem, or do they just want to know about Ayurveda like me?
I get a whole bunch. I feel like my clients have been drawn to the work I do or the things I talk about because somewhere it is connecting or is making sense to them on some level, whether it's Ayurveda or yoga or burnout. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. The kind of conversations I have with my client helps them understand their own situation from a different lens. Now, it's so difficult for you to look at your situation when you're in the situation. You end up evaluating something when it's not going right. You're not generally evaluating something if it's going right. Like, you're just happy with it. When you're not seeing a problem, you don't really feel the need to like fix anything, because what are you fixing? And I think a lot of people are working today or are existing today on a plane that is somewhere there. Nothing's wrong, but nothing is right either. And until something feels really wrong, there's no need to take on more work. So I think with like my conversations that I have with my clients, I try to reflect their or like mirror their lives back to them and nurture this connection that you have with your own life. And I think that's what's missing so much today, which leads to burnout even. That connection does not have to be something that you are creating. Like, you're not creating your values, you're not creating meaning, you're just connecting to whatever the values are already. Like, we all have values, we all have beliefs, we all have things that make us happy, but we just don't know what that is. When we know what makes us happy, and I always, like, my first module in my program is always finding what happiness is to you. And I have like these pillars that I work with. Knowing the difference between pleasure and happiness is how I start working with clients. Now, a lot of people, as I said, when nothing is wrong, there's nothing to fix. So there are things that give them pleasure, but are not really happiness driving factors. For me, traveling was a simple pleasure. It was not actually something that was giving me happiness. It wasn't true happiness. The true happiness was the freedom that I felt when I was traveling, the sort of connections that I was making when I was traveling. That is the deeper source of happiness for me. Traveling in itself was just a pleasure. A lot of people today, a lot of my clients especially, aren't able to differentiate between the pleasure and happiness factor. So when we start working, I want them to forge that connection with themselves to see what makes them happy, and if they're able to identify whether that exists in their life or not. So I'd say for you 6 months ago, Nalini, versus today, you probably didn't know anything was wrong until you were put in a situation where you're losing that sense of control. If you were in control, when I say in control, it's this illusion of control. If you're connected to what you're doing, then feels less of pressure when you're actually going through it. You're not then being driven around. You are like, okay, this is something that is asked of me. I will contribute to this with all my energy, but I need to fill my cup before I like pour out of it again. That connection comes with like knowing what is in your cup, what you need to sort of do to like energize yourself or, replenish your own energy. What makes you get out of bed? What makes you do whatever you're doing? Because I'm not saying that, working, like being pushed around is like really bad, or like working long hours is like the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is everything that happens before and after that. If you're just doing what is demanded out of you without really giving into yourself first, then of course you'll feel drained. Of course you'll have a panic attack because you're empty, like it's empty inside, it's directionless.
Like, I think what helped me truly was figuring out why I'm doing this job or why I'm working so hard. It doesn't have to be my life's purpose, but on a day-to-day basis, what I need from this and what I need from the rest of my life, and how do I divide and conquer, and how do I ensure that like I fill my cup while I'm doing that. So I think that was really, really meaningful. My learning from today has been that it doesn't have to always be for others. It should first be for yourself. And if that thing is also driving change in other people's lives, in the world, in like, the universe at large, that is a great thing to have. But to start somewhere, if someone wanted to start somewhere, it should be their own lives and their own day-to-day happiness. I think which is a very different takeaway than what we've had in most of our episodes so far, which also brings me to the fact that we're almost at time. But it's been so amazing. But I won't let you go without knowing about Ayurveda. So if you can throw in some tips for our listeners on like people who don't follow Ayurveda and the yogic life to improve their lives on a general level, what are the top 3 quick things probably that they can do? And they can follow you obviously on social media to know this on a regular basis. But just for Prickly Pear listeners, what would you say?
Before I answer that question, I want to define Ayurveda, and I think a lot of people sometimes don't or could benefit from that as well. Ayurveda literally translates to the knowledge of life. So it is this ancient healthcare system that has a set of tools and practices on how to govern your life to live the best version of your life, to live a healthy, balanced life. That's what Ayurveda is. In terms of 3 quick tips, I would say is add a lot of movement to your life. Movement without distractions, whether that is going for a walk in the morning, going for a walk before you go to sleep at night, or like after dinner or something. Move your body more. Like, movement is something that is so healing. People think of movement as like you have to go to a gym to like move. I disagree with that. Like, I feel like movement can be really simple. Like, just move. Like, we're leading such sedentary lifestyles. Move more in life. Let our body heal itself like naturally. Tip number 1 would be to move. Tip number 2 would be to take time to yourself in the morning, even if it's 5 minutes, and at night. So it's like sandwiching your day with time for yourself before you start your day and when you end your day. In the middle, you do things for other people. You're like serving others. You have jobs to go to. You have families and responsibilities that you're meeting. You can't get away from those responsibilities. You have to like fulfill those responsibilities to a very large extent. But when you start your day, take 5 minutes to yourself. When you end your day, take 5 minutes to yourself. That 5 minutes will, on a daily basis, again, compound to that empowerment, that feeling of content and energy replenishment that, we are not consciously doing. Also, it's that like mind-body connection that you're like forging and nurturing for yourself. It's one of those beautiful connections that you just have to look at it and it will grow. Like, you just water it a little bit and it will grow. It needs just a little bit of effort. So that's my second tip, is like spend time. And third is ask yourself why you're doing things that you're doing. Don't have to do this every single day. Don't have to do this like for every single task in your day. But you can make this a practice of like, what are you bringing to this world, or what are you bringing to your world. Your world can be the people around you, the things that you do. Now, these are very different to like yoga and Ayurveda because there's no movement involved, in the traditional sense of like what we think of yoga as or Ayurveda. But to do more, I would say start with like knowing how much you have to give. That self-awareness, self-reflection is the first step of change for anything like that. Finding meaning, finding purpose, again, it feels like a really loaded question, but when you break it down, it is so simple, and simplifying it will add so much more value to how you lead your everyday life.
Thank you, Naomi. I think like this has been a revelation in a lot of ways. I think I personally have come a long way from like on my personal journey from saying that this is not for me to actually connecting so much with what you said today. Ankita, do you have any final words?
No, thank you so much for redefining purpose in a way that I think we've not done so far on the episode. It's given me something to go back and think about a little more deeply. So, on that note, thank you. I'm going to get us out of here. We are out.